Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Black Ken Barbie, CNN's Laura Coates, and the Honorable Wes Moore, Governor of Maryland.
Black Ken and Barbie.
I know. We'll take it. We'll take it.
The Black Ken and Barbie. All right, Issa Rae. First of all, go ahead, Governor Moore.
Go ahead, Law.
Go ahead, Governor Moore.
Go ahead.
Doesn't it make you so proud to see this gentleman? It really does. And in a year where the work is cut out for so many people, particularly governors, particularly in politics, particularly when we're talking about what is most important. And everyone has been following your career, and I want to begin, before we get into the real substance of your views on different aspects of it, I just want us to take a moment to understand, what has this personal journey been like to culminate to this moment as Governor Wes Moore?
First, this is an absolute joy, and I'm honored to be with y'all, and I'm honored to sit with you. I can't tell you how proud our entire community is of you and your work, so God bless you, Lord. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's real.
Thank you.
And to be here, and President Lambert, I just want to say thank you and bless you for your work. The work that you all are doing here, the Greater Washington Urban League, is spectacular. And I tell you, to have the opportunity to be honored with people who I admire and respect so much. You know, I was saying earlier that I think of, there's a song called "A Case of You" by Prince.
Oh, Prince, I'm from Minnesota, hold on.
Yeah, now.
Okay,
Yeah,
talk
now.
slowly
The
now.
legend.
Go ahead, hold on, go ahead.
But there's a line in "A Case of You" where he says, I used to be frightened by the devil, and I found myself drawn to people who were unafraid. I used to be frightened by the devil, but I found myself drawn to people who are unafraid. And this is a room of people who are just unafraid. And I respect that. Because, I think about, you talk about this moment, we actually had our inauguration. Inauguration morning, we were very intentional. And we started down at the Annapolis docks. And the Annapolis docks, for those who have not been there, they're beautiful, it's a gorgeous place. But we started there because the Annapolis docks were one of this country's largest and first slave ports. And we started down there, we had a wreath laying, we said a prayer to the ancestors, and then we marched from the docks to the State House, and the State House was where I was sworn in. The State House was also built by the hands of enslaved people. But it was in front of that building that I was inaugurated as the 63rd governor of the state and the first black governor in the history of the state of Maryland. But I think about, the question of what does it mean for this moment. I'm proud that so many people in this room, what's up, Marylanders? That many people in this room, that it's because of them that we're here. But I'm also very clear that being the first wasn't the assignment. That wasn't the point. And being able to walk into every space we're in unafraid and make it matter that we make a moment matter and make it matter that we're here in the first place, that is very much the assignment. And that's what I think continues to drive me and every member of our team inside this work.
And he knows Prince. Check, please. Well, when you think about that and just the weight of that moment, I often look at this too as, imagine the people who are afraid and do it anyway.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They're afraid of what would be if they failed to act.
Yes.
And that fear drives them more than anything else. And you have been somebody who's been quite fearless in the sense of prioritizing the thought of what it would be like if you didn't answer your own calling.
That's right.
Does that drive you in the thought, and what makes you feel afraid?
Yes. Well, it does, because I think we all have to remember there's something ephemeral and temporary about everything that we are, right? There's actually, so for example, there's a clock that actually sits on my desk. And that clock actually is a countdown for how many days that we have left in our first term. Now it's 1,031.
Wow.
Because I look at it every single day. And that, by the way, that's just the first term. We're going to run it back. We're going to run for re-election. We'll win, so we'll get it done. But
wait, Governor, re-election or maybe a different office in 4 years?
We're going to run it back.
Okay, we'll put a pin in that. We'll put a pin in that.
But it's true, right? Because I just feel like there has to be a natural impatience that all of us have in the seats and the spots we're in. I remember my mother used to tell me something where she said, genius is understanding when patience is a virtue and when patience is a detriment.
Repeat that again for us.
That genius is understanding when patience is a virtue and when patience is a detriment. That there are some moments that, you know what, it's okay to be patient. It's actually smart to be patient. And there are some moments when patience is pacification. And you just have to be able to move at a space and at a consistency that you understand which one is which. Because if at the end of a time, if the only thing that is accomplished that you were just happy to be here, then the blessing has been completely wasted on you. And it should have been given to somebody else. And so I just think that for all of us who have this feeling of blessing, we have to remember that that blessing is not given. That blessing must be earned. And that blessing must be returned. And that's I think the great thing about the folks in this room, the folks who are out there in streets and communities every single day, because there's an appreciation of the blessing and what that return on that blessing actually has to look like.
It sounds that you are very clear that you didn't come all this way to just come this far.
That's it.
And when you think about so many people who believe that the position is the ultimate attainment as opposed to the beginning of the work, I wonder, as the first Black governor of Maryland, knowing that the assignment was not to be the first or the last, do you fight against people and forces who want you to please just to maintain the position?
Yes. I mean, yes. I think the thing that I think about in that case, though, is they're not the people that put us there. So I don't, I try to live by this idea of, don't let people that don't matter too much matter too much.
I'm gonna put that on my wall.
You know what I mean? But it's real because, like, there are, and there will be some who will try to make an argument that the reason that we are there is because of them.
Yeah.
Right? Because then, if they think that's the case, they want you to act accordingly once you are in there.
Because you owe them.
Because you owe them. And I just, I try to move, and I know my team, my amazing team who's here. By the way, I do love the fact that I am the 63rd governor of the state, but our team and our state is powered by Black women, and I am proud of that fact. But it's one of these things where, and I remember on the night of election night, I was speaking to, I was thanking my two children. I've got a beautiful 12-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. And I said to them, me and Jamie, and I said, I want to let you know, and I said, I'm speaking to you, but I'm speaking to every single child in this state. You are never in a room that you don't belong in. You are never in a room because of someone's benevolence. You are never in a room because of someone's kindness. You are never in a room because of someone's social experiment. You're never in a room because someone wanted to sprinkle diversity into the room. You are in that room because you belong there, and you're in that room because the room would be incomplete if you were not there. And I think that the way, so we try to move and maneuver with an understanding that we're not there because of a social experiment. Because if you believe that, you move differently. Because there's always a fear that something can be taken. You're there because that room would be incomplete if you weren't there. And if you move with that, you understand that you being you, believing in what you believe in, fighting for what you fight for, is why you're there. So why would I ever change now that I'm actually here? And so that's how we try to move.
You know, we often hear about imposter syndrome, but you've turned it on its head, Governor, because it sounds like as many people are thinking to themselves as they look to their left and their right, and they're in that mindset of faking it till they make it.
Yeah.
Your version of imposter syndrome is not impersonating yourself, but showing up as who you are.
That's exactly right.
So if you were to define who you are, is it defined based on the beliefs that you have, the regrets that you hold, or the future you anticipate?
Come on now. That's why she's the best, man.
Oh, should I look at the notes? Hold on. You don't want to
Roll
hear
with it.
this.
Put them away.
Let's get real.
I love it. You know, I think about my grandparents, and you know, it's wild because my grandfather was actually the first one on my mom's side of the family born in the United States. Was born in South Carolina, and when he was just a toddler, we got some South Carolinians up here.
We got one. Okay, there we go. We got a couple more.
One.
Okay, there you go. How about Minnesota?
And Prince.
Hold on, Governor. I'm going to fix my dress because I'm thinking about my grandmother. No need for a prayer cloth. Go ahead.
No, but you know, so my grandfather was a minister.
Yes.
And my grandmother was a school teacher for 40 years. And my grandmother was like the lioness of our family. Born in Cuba, raised most of her life in Jamaica, and then in our yardies, and then came to the United States and raised not her her children, but really her grandchildren, because I went to go live with my grandparents. And I remember right before my grandmother passed away 5 days before Election Day. And in fact, I remember towards the end, she was always like, I got to be there for Election Day. I got to be there for Election Day. But she was so weak. And I would always tell her, you're going to be there, Mama, when you'll be there. I really believe in the bottom of my heart that she made a bet with God, and she made a deal with God, where she was like, I have to see my grandson win this race. And God told her, because there was no way she was going to be able to make it to the convention center. She was so weak at that point. And I believe deep in the bottom of my heart that God told her, if you come home, I will give you a front row seat. Oh. And she was there that night. But I say that because there was something she always said to us, both her and my grandfather. In fact, they wrote it in a Bible before I deployed to Afghanistan. I was with the 82nd Airborne. I was a paratrooper. Oh, I was a paratrooper with the military. And she wrote, these are my people out here, man.
I see it. It's all family. I love it.
It's all family. But she wrote, have faith, not fear. Have faith, not fear. And so when I think about what is the thing that drives me, what is the thing that motivates me, I don't think a fear of something is ever going to be a real motivating factor. Because I think a fear of something is not just temporary. A fear of something isn't a driving force. There's a faith. There's a hope. There's this idea that joy does come in the morning. And I know that when I think about the thing that drives me, what drives me is my faith. A faith in God, a faith in family, a faith in friends, a faith in mission, a faith in tomorrow. And that's why I think every single day we can actually get up with the right energy about how we're thinking about what it is we're actually trying to accomplish for that day.
Man, I got news for you, Governor. I think you might be the kind of person, when you wake up in the morning and your feet hit the ground, the devil probably says, damn it, he's up again.
He's up again. I didn't get him.
He's up again.
Not today.
Not today. Not today.
Not today.
Well, let's talk about today, though, because as we think about the dreams that we all have and that we all want for our children, our kids are around the same age. I have a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old. My 9-year-old thinks that we're the same age. I have news for her, but she happens to be a beautiful mini-me. When you think about the dreams you have, so many parts of our American dream, and it's odd that that's the one monolith we still seem to hold on to.
Yes.
We only have one dream, apparently.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's often tied to things like home ownership. It's tied to wealth.
Yes.
It's tied to many of the things which we find in our communities we are deficient or have a disparity. When you think about how you get people to realize dreams in those ways, there are frustrations you must have that motivate you.
Yeah.
How do you turn it around?
You know, I remember, so right before I ran for governor, I was running one of the largest poverty fighting organizations in the country. And we started a platform called 90 to 0, which was about how to address the racial wealth gap in our society. And I remember when I told one of my board members, I said, I think I'm gonna leave. And he said to me, so what are you gonna do? And I said, I think I'm gonna run for governor. And he's like, okay. And then he said, well, what kind of issues do you want to work on? And I told him I want to work on things like the racial wealth gap. Yeah. And he said, but you're already doing it now. Why would you leave and go into government if you're already working on that issue now? And I remember looking back at him and I said, why do you think the racial wealth gap exists in the first place? You can't understand the racial wealth gap in our society if you don't understand things like the Homestead Act. You can't understand the racial wealth gap if you don't understand the unfair application of the GI Bill. You can't understand the racial wealth gap if you don't understand unfair appraisal values in historically redlined neighborhoods. You can't understand the racial wealth gap if you don't understand racist procurement policies. These are all things that have generated and created a racial wealth gap. So when we talk about things like, so for example, in the state of Maryland, when we took office, Maryland had an 8-to-1 racial wealth gap. 8-to-1. And I was very clear, we don't have an 8-to-1 racial wealth gap because one group is working 8 times harder, right? And when we talk about wealth, it's important to say, there's a reason that we want to focus on wealth and not just income, because those are two very different things, right? Income is one thing. Wealth is something that's very different. Wealth is ownership. Wealth is this idea that you can actually own more than you owe. Wealth is the idea that you can pass something off to your children besides debt. And we have to focus on wealth creation. And so that means, and it's why we have been very deliberate in just our first 14 months of saying, I want the state of Maryland to be the first state to eliminate the racial wealth gap. And there's ways to do this. There's ways to do it when we do things like fixing broken procurement policies and making sure that our MBEs and our WBEs and our veteran businesses are actually getting the capital that they need and deserve. And where in our first year, we were able to allocate over $1.4 billion going towards MBEs in the state of Maryland and making sure that our MBEs are not just seen, but getting the capital that they need. That we were able to, this year, we introduced the most aggressive housing package in our state's history from any administration that's focusing on things like home ownership, making historic investments in fair appraisal values, because we know that unfair appraisal values have been one of the greatest wealth thefts that we have seen in our state's history. That our ability to be able to focus on things like liquidity and capital for our small businesses and our MBEs and our entrepreneurs, because oftentimes for small businesses and MBEs, the first round of capital is what they call, the friends and family round. Right. Here's the problem. Not all of us have the same friends. And not all of us have the same family. And so our ability to be able to level a playing field and increase liquidity and capital towards our entrepreneurs, towards our Black-owned businesses, is a way that we can actually drive measurements of long-term wealth, which, by the way, and what I say to people, this is not a zero-sum game. The racial wealth gap has cost this country $16 trillion in GDP over the past 2 decades. That's Citigroup's numbers. And that's not GDP of a group, that's GDP. So if we can actually do things like address the racial wealth gap, like we've been able to see in the impact we've already been able to see in the state of Maryland, what you're going to do is fundamentally you're going to grow our economy. Our economy for the past 5 years in Maryland had grown by 0.2%. Our unemployment rate when I first took over was we were 43rd in the country. Now, by being intentional, by focusing on growing the pie, by being intentional on things like liquidity and capital to our MBEs, what has happened? Maryland now, for the 5th straight month, has amongst the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country.
Wow, wow.
We have jumped 20 slots in economic momentum, making Maryland one of the fastest growing economies in the entire state. So the point is this, by being intentional and deliberate and focusing on things like wealth in all communities and not just some, you're not just gonna help a community, you're going to grow the entire GDP of a state in a way that the entire state can benefit from it as well.
You know, your intelligence is undeniable, but so are the political headwinds. And as much as many are focused on being intentional and focused on the gap and closing it, there will be many who are intentional and focused on expanding it.
Yes.
Largely because those who have benefited from the disparities in our country want to keep benefiting from those disparities. How do you address and navigate the politics of those who do not want you to succeed?
Yeah. You know, I remember when I first started going through this process of running. First, I remember literally when I first started running, I was polling at 1%. In fact, I'm not voting was polling higher than Wes Moore. It was politics, a very humbling business, and
my, how things have changed.
oh my, how things have changed, and by the end of the campaign, by election day, we ended up getting more individual votes than anyone who's ever run for governor in the history of the state of Maryland.
Really?
Ever.
Wow.
But the thing that I knew was this: you don't get to the numbers that we got to by just winning black folks. You don't get to those numbers by just winning Democrats. You don't get to those numbers by just winning Baltimore, my hometown. You get to those numbers because we swept. You get to those numbers because we won Democrats, we won independents, and we took a good chunk of Republicans. We won those numbers because we won Baltimore, and we won Eastern Shore jurisdictions and Western Maryland jurisdictions. We went everywhere. We went everywhere. And I remember, and this is one of the reasons that, you know, I'm really thankful for, you know, Maryland in our first months. Maryland became the first state in this country that now has a service year option for all of our high school graduates.
Wow.
All of our high school graduates have a chance to have a year of service. And the beautiful thing about it is this, is in addition to focusing on workforce development and experiential learning, one of the reasons that we're so proud of this initiative is because I believe deeply that in this moment of political divisiveness and political vitriol, and where people seem to care more about is it, you know, who came up with the idea than is it a good idea, I believe that service will save us. Service will save us. And I saw it because I have people who I served with in the military, people I served with in Afghanistan, who came and campaigned on my behalf. Many of them were not Marylanders. Many of them were not Democrats. But they came and door knocked on my behalf, and they were just simply saying, let me tell you about the guy that I served with. Because service is sticky. And so we're always gonna have people who do not want to see us succeed. We're always going to have people who will spend their time with our impression on their minds and with our names on their tongues. The thing I know is this: there's not enough of them to stop me. And there's not enough of them to stop us. So our ability to be able to go everywhere, share our ideas, share our message, share our joy, our ability to do that is how we are going to overcome the kind of divisiveness that we continue to see in our society now.
The optimism is incredibly refreshing to hear, particularly in a space where there is a deficit of enthusiasm oftentimes around our elections. So many people, I was just talking to President Lambert about this very notion, about how there are two presidential nominees, all short of the confetti falling from the ceiling.
Yeah.
But there are third-party candidates that might be in the wings, but there's also the third party of the couch and the other third party of apathy, when people are opting out of even participating in the process. How do you get people to feel a sense of power and agency in a system when you've got the Voting Rights Act gutted under Section 5 and the formula never changed by Congress? When you've got the confidence and credibility of our institutions either toxic in Congress and dysfunctional at best, or the Supreme Court questioned in terms of their nonpartisanship. How do you get people to come out and still fight?
It's interesting because it goes back to the Dr. King quote where he said, we have to fight to make sure that the Negro in Mississippi can vote, and to make sure that the Negro in New York has a reason to vote. And it's funny because I get it. I think about my own family, right? I had to convince members of my family to vote for me.
That's like a personal problem, Governor. I don't know.
and it's not that me and my family are very cool. It's that I had to convince them to vote.
Yeah.
Because for many of them, they hadn't voted. They've opted out. And so that cynicism that a lot of people feel is real. And honestly, it's a cynicism that in many ways I still hold, right? Like I still hold a sense of cynicism, and I'm the governor, right? But so cynicism will always be my companion. It just won't be my captor. Because I understand what had to happen in order for this to take place, in order for us to even have an opportunity to be able to do the things that we're going to do. I mean, and if you just look at if you look at our history, I think about the history of just Marylanders, right? Look at, Harriet Tubman was a Marylander. Frederick Douglass was a Marylander. Thurgood Marshall was a Marylander.
Governor Wes Moore is a Marylander.
But I'm like, I think about a conversation I would have with Harriet Tubman telling her how frustrating the system is and why I should opt out. And what kind of look she would give me. I think about, I would love for one day for me to have a conversation with Frederick Douglass and be like, you know what? What's going on is crazy right now. I'm done. It's like, we have to remember what we've come from. We have to remember what people did on our behalf. We have to remember that the history of our nation and our state is remarkably uneven. But there's a reason why that history has continued to move on, is because there were people who were actually willing to push for the hope of us. That's why they fought, for the hope of us. And so when I think about these moments, or having conversations with people say, it doesn't matter who sits in these seats. I don't have, what I say doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who is the president. I can tell you right now, not only does it matter, the disrespect to the ancestors with that comment alone is staggering. And so when people are seeing momentum or progress, when people are seeing, talking points and stunting, when people are seeing, anger and vitriol, when people are seeing ignorance being spouted, because you're right, I mean, there are people in our society some who have no titles at all and who are doing remarkable work. Right. And there are some people who have amazingly big titles and who are doing absolutely nothing with it besides destroying a fabric and a foundation that they stand on. We have a right to be able to not just understand the difference, but push back against the difference. And so that's why, when I tell people, like, I'm all in. I'm all in on this election. I'm all in on our society. I know this is a non-political event, Mr. President. This is not you saying it. This is me saying it. I am all in to make sure President Biden gets reelected this year because the stakes matter. It matters. It matters. That wasn't you, sir. That was me. But when we think about what's at stake, when we think about what's on the line, and when we think about what had to happen in order for us to be sitting here right now having this conversation, I refuse to disrespect them and to tell them right now what we're looking at, it just doesn't matter. Refuse.
I do hope many more will refuse as well in that. And it strikes me that in order to have, as you're talking, in order to have that sense of obligation, and frankly, the privilege of having the rights and not thinking about civil rights as an era that was a bookended period in time, but as an ongoing, continuous emotion and motivation and movement. It strikes me that the value of Black and brown lives are oftentimes the thing that is most in question to people. The value that is assigned to Black and brown voters during an election year is off the charts.
Yes.
And then the next year, not regarded again.
Come on. Come on.
I know this has not been the experience in terms of how you have operated as a candidate and incumbent, but surely you've seen your colleagues engage in something similar.
Yes.
How do you encourage and ensure that Black and brown lives are valued not simply by the votes that they will actually provide or the assignment of a civil settlement with respect to an unlawful death,
Yes.
but instead valuing the contributions and the potential?
Yes. Come on, Laura. I think by making sure that people have a chance to not just see the faces and spaces that reflect them, but know that the people who are sitting in those seats are actually putting together policies that reflect them too. You know, I'm proud of the fact that we have built the most diverse administration in the history of the state of Maryland, and if you look at our cabinet administration, it's the most diverse administration in the entire country.
Wow.
This is the first, myself and our lieutenant governor, a woman named Aruna Miller, who's the first immigrant ever elected to statewide office. We ran as a ticket. It's the first time in the history of this country that you have two people of color serving as governor and lieutenant governor of a state at the same time. Over 60% of our cabinet officials are people of color, 40% are Black, 60% are women. We said we wanted to be very intentional about building an administration that looks like the state of Maryland, where everybody could look up and say, I see myself represented, but that we also have shown in our state that being able to have an eye on equity and being able to also have an eye on excellence, they're not exclusive conversations. In fact, you need one in order for the other to be real, because it's not just the most diverse administration in the state's history. This is the baddest administration in the state's history. We want to always think through and think about this idea I don't look at issues for the African American community or the Latino community or the Asian community, just, Black and brown communities in our state. I never look at us and our communities from a place of a deficit. They're an asset. That oftentimes, and when we say that, well, what do we need to do to save communities? First of all, we need to stop talking about saving Black communities. Black communities don't need you to save us. We need you to stop removing the barriers that continue to be placed in front of us. That when we're talking about things like child poverty and concentrated child poverty, we just introduced a bill that I just personally testified on behalf of called the Enough Act in the state of Maryland. And Enough stands for engaging neighborhoods, organizations, unions, governments, and households, i.e. la-di-da-di everybody. But it's about how are we addressing the issue of not just concentrated child poverty, but generational child poverty. These pockets, these zones, these zip codes that we have in our state, that it's not just yet you have children who are living in child poverty, it's that when you look at the heat map, that heat map in 2024 looks exactly the same as it looked in 2014. And exactly the same as what it looked like in 2004. The only difference is those places that are red, they've just gotten redder. So how can we come up with a full approach, and in the case of the Enough Act, a first of its kind in the nation, approach of mixing philanthropy, private dollars, state and federal, to say, what would it look like if you actually flooded those zones with not just resources, but flooded those zones with hope? What would it look like if you could address poverty in the way that it shows itself, which is in every way? It's the air that people are breathing, it's the water they are drinking, it's the transportation assets they have or don't have, it's the homes that they are living in, it's the way they are policed, it's the schools that our children are attending. What would it look like if we could actually be intentional about unearthing assets instead of constantly just thinking about, I'm a kid, I had handcuffs on my wrist when I was 11 years old. Because I came up in a community that was over-policed and we knew it, and we knew that was the only way that they addressed and thought about us. What would it look like if we actually did the inverse? And that's when I talk about this idea of a moment, of being able to actually have policies, being able to actually have bills, and being able to put a new lens on how we see our children, on how we see our communities, and what we hope for. Because we are not in many ways products of our environments. We're products of our expectations. What could happen if we actually change the expectations? And what would that actually look like? And that's the grand experiment that I think is taking place in the state of Maryland right now. And that's why I just think Maryland's moving faster than any other state in the country.
Wow. We don't have much time left. I want to leave with this, Governor Moore. I'm sure for many people who are listening to you, they are completely captivated by what you're saying and the expectations and the hope and the optimism and the determination. It must be difficult, though, because I bet most are also wondering not just what you'll do now, but hoping to accelerate their knowledge of what you'll do next. That's a tension you must be facing. On the one hand, wanting to focus on what is before you, but a lot of pressure in our society politically to remove you from where you are, to thrust you to where they would like to see you next. How will you stay focused on what you are determined to do today?
I think the way I stay focused is I honestly, I don't feel that tension.
Well, there is tension, because everyone's wondering if it's going to become well, let me breaking news moment. No.
But no, because, like, I mean, listen, and this is real, like, I'm playing with house money. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I'm the son of an immigrant single mom who raised 3 kids on her own. I'm a kid whose mom didn't get her first job that gave her benefits until I was 14. And that wasn't because she wasn't working hard enough. This is a woman who went on to earn a master's degree. So when anyone's telling me about, when anyone wants to tell me about, unequal pay between men and women or unequal pay between people of color and non, I tell them, I don't need a white paper to explain it. You don't need to brief me. I grew up in this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a kid. I joined the Army when I was 17 years old. I wasn't even old enough to join the Army when I first signed up. My mother had to sign the paperwork. But after my teenage years, she would sign whatever paperwork the Army put in front of her. So I'm playing with house money. And I go to work every day with joy. I go to work every day knowing that what we are doing, we are literally every single day doing something special that nobody else in this country is doing. So I'm good. I want everybody to come to Maryland. And I just think that what we're doing right now is we're doing, and you think about the bills that we've gotten passed, we literally have gone completely 100% on every bill that we've introduced to the General Assembly. In addition to that, by the way, we've gone 100% bipartisan. We've gotten Republican and Democratic support on every single bill that we've introduced in the General Assembly. I say that because we're leading. This is going to be Maryland's decade. And I'm excited to have a chance to be a part of that. And so I don't feel a tension. I know we have a part to play. I know that we have a larger healing that Maryland's going to be an important part of. I know that I will have a part to play to make sure that this nation does the right thing in November. And I plan on being out there and making my case to make sure that this country does the right thing in November. But I also know that where I'm at right now, I just thank God for the chance to be where I'm at. I thank God for the opportunity. And I refuse to waste this opportunity because I'm looking at something else. That's not the assignment. That's not why the people of this state put me in the seat that I'm in.
Thank God your grandmother has that front row seat.
That's right.
Thank you. And I tonight as well, thank you so much. Thank you to the Greater Washington Urban League for having us. And thank you, Governor Wes Moore.
God bless you and thank you.
Wonderful.
God bless you.
Thank you, you too.
Governor Moore and Ms. Coates, everybody.
Thank you so much. Very proud.
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
So proud of you.
That was inspiring. Oh my God. And actually, I want you guys to stay right there for a minute. So take your picture, but don't leave. Stay right there. I hope y'all witnessing something. This is the first governor in the history of America that's ever said la-di-da-di, everybody. Have you ever heard a governor say that? Only him. And he said, la-di-da-di, everybody. Y'all hear it? It was... Okay, first, thank you, Laura. I mean, you've always been a very special friend to the organization.
Yes.
Hold on. During COVID, you hosted an equity summit on justice for us, as well as the equity and sports panel, both of which were highly informational and motivating. Well, we couldn't give you your award in person at the time because of that doggone COVID, but we wanted to take a moment and make sure to give you your roses while you were here. You are an important voice in our community and have given ownership of democracy to a generation. We thank you for all you do. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Laura Coates. Thank you, Laura. We know you have to go, but thanks for hanging out with us. Appreciate that.
My honor.
So that's Laura Coates. You're gonna have Laura skirts, Laura pants, Laura blouses. It's gonna be online. Stay right there, Governor.
This way? Okay, yep.
Oh, you stay right there, sir. Stay
okay.
right there. Right there.
Uh-oh.
Now, first of all, I want you to tell the people something just for me.
Yes, sir.
With a bowl of grits, is it salt, pepper, and butter or sugar? Just tell the people. What is it? What is it?
Grits with sugar is cream of wheat.
Thank you and good night. Good night, everybody. Good night.
And cheese.
Thank you so much, sir. I just wanted to get it out there. Okay, let me get back on script. I had, because I felt a connection to him. I had to ask. That's my brother right there. Okay, Governor Moore. We look forward to what your leadership will bring to the great state of Maryland. And with that, the Leadership Impact Award recognizes an individual who delivers exceptional results in addressing critical urban challenges with innovative solutions and very little in the way of assistance. The original award was given to the late Honorable John Lewis because of his reputation for being a firebrand, a necessary attribute to function at a high level while under major duress. Ladies and gentlemen, this year, our Leadership Impact Award honoree, that man, the Honorable Governor Wes Moore.
I'm honored. God bless you. I'm honored. Thank you. Wow.
Sure.
God bless you. Oh, we
Go
got
to the middle of the stage. Go to the middle. Go take a picture. That's the kind of photo that should go viral right there, y'all. That's the one right there.